Chaim Beis, Volume 1, page Shin Vav. We're up to page 306. We're in the middle of chapter 155. So I did a summary of all the whole so-called Chaim Beis up till here, not yesterday, in the last class. So if anyone wants to look at that, they could. Now, we're continuing on with the whole idea of these. What will explain?
I forgot to change the point. Okay, you could do it afterwards.
The Iyu v'chayu echad, the Iyu v'gamu echad, according to the beard of the Alter Rebbe in Ageres HaKodesh. The chayu are the Eiris, and the gamu are the Kev. So the relevance to our discussion, firstly, just with the context is important, is we've been going through here, basically, everything is around the Kreich HaBlikvul and Kreich HaGvul. And it's about the fusion, the interface between Gvul and Blikvul, which is the key connection. In the words of what we're discussing now, the difference between the Veda of the Ovis and the Veda of Matan Teda. So the challenge here is, how do you connect a world that is finite and mortal and limited in so many ways, fundamentally, with a divine that is perfect, immortal, infinite, and seemingly two opposite realities. And the interface that the Rebbe Rashab establishes here is that Elokus itself manifests in structure of existence. Just when we say that human beings created the image of God, right there at the beginning of the Chumash, what does that mean? Tzelem Elokim, it's Amenukim Hussein, means that in some way Elokus, God is manifested in Tzelem Mus structure, what we call Adam Elyon, the Mus Adam, of Musa Kisei, or in Lashon Kabbalah Chassidus Esosfiris. So there are 10 divine attributes. Not that Atzmus Elokus is 10 divine, but he's manifested in that. He has the power to do so. That in turn would evolve to many tsumim and concealments into a structure that we call structure of existence. Human being, this is the image of the divine. So we too have Esekeches, like he says in Tanya, Esekeches Nishtalshul Mehen. Our 10 faculties, Nishtalshul, from the 10 spheres. So we have now a bridge. There's still work to be done, but there's some commonality. Chachma v'Elokus, you have Chachma in the Adam. Chachma v'Elokus manifests a Chachma of Teda. When you learn Teda, you're connected to God's wisdom. If God not manifested in wisdom, we maybe be smart, but we wouldn't be able to get through Chachma v'Elokus. It would be human wisdom or worldly wisdom. Just to use that as an example. But more precisely, it breaks down even further, because you still need that every connection be made properly. You still know where does the Gvul meet the Blikvul. That's the real question. This would, you could say, okay, so the divine, connected to the divine as it manifests in the Tzelem Elokim, or as it manifests in the essence Fides, which is the Sadibris, Sadamamoris, the 10 utterances. So we have a connection. The question is, do the 10 spheres connect upward? How far do they take us back to the Elokus? That's the question. So here's the Pasuk Eliyahu that he brings. Iyu v'chayu echad. Not Pasuk, I'm sorry, to Kunizeh. Iyu v'chayu echad. Iyu v'gamu echad is telling us, Iyu, Elokus, you are one with your chayu. You're one with your energies. And Iyu v'gamu echad, you're one with your containers. Which is telling us that the containers, that is the structure, are one with the Iyu of Elokus. So they lead us back to God. It's not just remains in the structure. But to understand this, you have two different expressions. He explains that that refers to two different types of levels of Iyu. It doesn't say Iyu v'chayu v'gamu echad. That would be one level of Iyu, chayu and gamu, and there's one chad. Iyu v'chayu echad, Iyu v'gamu echad means there's two different dimensions of Iyu, and there's two different levels of chad, of the unity. How does he explain this? So he says that Iyu v'chayu echad refers to the Eiris. Chayu is the Eir. Eir, its Indian, its purpose is Gili. It expresses the divine. So that is clear. It's expressing and tells us that there's a divine source. Just like sunlight tells us there's a sun. It reveals it to us. a revealing force. Not that it reveals everything about Atzmus, as we learned. There's much about Atzmus that doesn't come into that earth cannot reveal on its own. But it does reveal. It reveals there is a force that is being expressed, that's being revealed in this world. That's what Iyu v'chayuchad is that Iyu, the Keyach HaBligul of Elokus, is one with this Eir, which is revealing it. And even the Eir, that says, that will later become Eir HaGvul and become manifest in containers, from this perspective of Iyu v'chayuchad, it's still Eir, like we learned, that the infinite, so-called, think of it, the infinite projection of light from a projector, that will later become a light that shines through film, and it will have, let's say, the Eir HaChesed, Eir HaGvul, and so on, is also, because the infinite light envisioned, and Shir Atzmei, as he puts it, this Eir HaGvul. Eir HaGvul now. So that's one side. One side, right. Then there's another unity going on. The unity between the divine that wants to have a structure. That's Garmui. Garmui is, like he said earlier, the etzomis, the bones, like the skeleton. Now we're talking structure. We're not talking about divine revelation. We're talking about God wants a structure. He wants it. He wants a yesh. Eir doesn't make a yesh. The first dimension is all about revelation. It's not about yesh. This one wants a yesh, like he said, because the yesh is the purpose, in order to have something that feels independent, fundamentally concealed. The kavanah is for us to transform it. The kavanah dir b'tachtein. That's a particular, another so-called parallel track. This is called the Keyach HaGvul. This will manifest in containers, or the source, the Asius Harashimu. And when you will conceal, initially this power is also submerged in the first track. So therefore you don't see it. It's like it's all submerged in the Eir HaBligul. But when you remove, so-called withdraw the Eir HaBligul, you conceal it, this power now emerges. And it's a fundamentally a concealed power because it has to make a yesh. But it's still divine power. And that too is one with Elokus. That too, like someone, like what he says in Shaykh Ramuna, who hein v'reisav. The Tzimtzum is just as much Elokus as the Eir. Except it manifests in a different way. Now, what's that? So this is Iyu v'Garmui that he's one with the containers, or what you call one with his Keyach HaGvul. Keyach HaEinsof, to be made with B'chinas Yisavos, to create in the form of Helen, is also Misyachid with the Keyach HaEinsof. Now, obviously, when they work together, there's two tracks, then you have everything. The first one reveals, the second one creates. So the first one will reveal the power that the second one has to create, and that one also will, once you have Eir HaBligul that reveals, it will also help to reveal what the power of Keyach HaGvul is, and to show that Atzmus is far greater than Eir, as we discussed.
It creates basic conceals.
Could you have reversed it, and it could have been the same thing, or something, would it maybe even made more sense to say the second part first, and the creation first, then the revelation part?
Not really, because logically, you first reveal, then you conceal. That's why. In other words, obviously God can jump
reveal too, but there's nobody to reveal to.
No, that's correct. But because of what we learned, and we'll learn it later, I think more we learn that because there's a concept of Gili, so therefore it's already embedded in existence. So even when the Tzimtzum is taking place, the concept of Gili is there, except it's concealed. It's like, think of it this way: if a teacher is teaching a student, you'd say you just have Tzimtzum and no Gili. It starts with Gili. It starts with that he wants to reveal. But I can't reveal unless I conceal. And that's another.
So it already so before.
No, it's a good point. In other words, even in the concealment, there's ultimately the fact that you say the word conceal means that it's potentially revealable. That's a word.
And on both sides, is there a yichud?
Also, you know, the nafkamina, if you only created symptoms like what you're saying, God forbid you could have an airtight darkness where God would not be there, but can create a situation of like a Holocaust, but with such cheshech where you can't, where light doesn't pierce. The fact that the first comes the Keyach HaBligul in the air, and then comes the Keyach HaHelam means that the Keyach HaHelam is never completely, so tight closed that no light can come in. You know what I'm saying? In other words, there would be no dawn, would never break if you only had that other power. Because God, of course, God, Shmuel Islam, the mata aden tachel, God can conceal himself to such depth that nobody can ever reveal him. That would be, obviously, from our point of view, tragic.
There's no point there.
Right, and ultimately there's no point. but it would be that's when we say there's a Holocaust, when there's real tragedies. It has to upon that. It's God in His worst concealment. Now, it doesn't take away that it's a godly power, but it's not what we consider to be pleasant.
Do both sides have Yehudi Yilua and Yehudi Tator, or is one side Yehudi Yilua and the other side?
He doesn't say here. Right here he doesn't. Maybe later he'll start. Right now it's two different levels of Chad for sure, because the unity in the second one is clearly less revealed. It's one. In some ways you could say the EU with the Kalim is deeper. The Chad is deeper because it's much more. We said different Atzmos.
Right.
You want to appreciate Atzmos, you see it much more in creation than you see in Revelation.
On both sides, there's both of them. Right?
Yeah. So, but here he's just distinguishing that there's two tracks. That's the key here. Now, in chapter 155, which we learned first half, I'll just sum that up now. He takes us now further.
No.
Takes us further. Now, Geras HaKedesh, just like I said in Eir, is like the two dimensions, Eir HaBlikvul, and then there's Eir HaGvul, which is an extension. In track number 2, Geras HaKedesh doesn't say Garmuhi, it's actually the Kelim. It says it's the Eir Pnimi, and it's Yachid in HaKelim. There's also Eir, but it's Eir as it's united with Kelim, and through the Kelim it creates. That's the Lashon. Geras HaKedesh it says, Shebehen Ba'al Yoda Nivru. So you have Eiris, Ir V'Chayuchad, Ir V'Gamuyuchad, which are the Kelim, the Eiris and the Kelim, Shebehen Ba'al Yodam, through the Kelim it creates. So, what's the distinction? The key thing is like this. This is not Gramuy, not Chayu. It's still Eir. But here it's an Eir that is already now manifesting in the instruments of creation. So the focus is on creation here, not on revelation. So now, even in Eir, you have how Eir is so-called being shaped by the Kelim. That's the key point he's adding in this chapter. I mean, again, it makes it extremely eloquent, because you have here literally, you literally, right, you see step by step how it works.
But this is Eir HaGvul, right?
Yeah. This is Eir HaGvul that is also being in, not just Eir HaGvul. Earlier there's also Eir HaGvul. This is Eir HaGvul, not Shir Atzmik, the way God envisioned it. This is Eir HaGvul that's being impacted and shaped and actualized, you can say, by the containers, right? So he says. So I'm not going to read all inside. I'll just go quickly. So yeah, Agam ze move mashe shehem ze kiim ze tzedach esav. Not atzmis evis. Explain. This is the keli magdal se'el lifel k'fe'efim mehusadak. This is how the keli preys on the Eir that it should work commensurate to it, tailored. And then he goes to the example of the Guf Nefesh, that even though when a person is alive, the nefesh has all the strengths and powers that goes through the body, but there's something that the physical faculties and organs, limbs, affect the Eir. It's megashim. The physical eye takes the energy of vision and turns it into something you can see that's physical. It's no longer that same refined, abstract power of vision on its own. So we see from here that it affects it. Okay. But then,
So Ir V'Gamuyuchad means the oil, not the Kelim.
the Eir HaMesiach, but the Eir that is in the Kelim.
And the Kelim is not hot.
It doesn't say, doesn't discuss that yet. It's possible that it is, but he's tells me, that's the case. He's speaking with the Eir and it's not with the Kelim. Maybe through that, the Kelim also becomes. Not sure. We'll see. We're still in the middle of it. I don't know how he's going to conclude with that. Now he goes off. He goes into somewhat of a roundabout way, comes back to this by starting to discuss the whole thing in Aveda, which makes it actually, if you really appreciate it, can really help us understand well, appreciate well, the whole idea. What is it in Aveda? In Aveda, there's two types of neshamas. There's neshamas that are called Evdei Hashem b'neshmaso, and Evdei Hashem b'gufo. So just I'll go backwards here, even though here he goes the other way, and then I'll go back. Evdei Hashem b'gufo is Evdei Hashem b'neshmaso is Moshe Rabbeinu is usually the mashal for that. Evdei Hashem b'gufo Eliyahu Hanavi is the mashal. Sometimes in some of the world, neshamas of ma and neshamas of ba. Primarily, the difference in them, just in simple English, is one's role is primarily to radiate a lot. The power of a neshama just to pierce this world, or the agili eir. Like it says by Mishnah, Ismail Abayis Kula Eir. He was born, house filled with faith. That was Moshe. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have any birur. He also did work in this world, but his power, his main avodah, is just a really about high neshama.
So what's that way then?
There's always avodah. First of all, even avodah of Gili is also avodah. Yet the fact that Pari, there's always work. No such thing as no avodah. It's like we say by Yisachar and Zvul. Primarily, his thing is Teda. This one's main thing is mitzvahs or Gemach. They all have both. It's just a matter of priority, really. Like he says, I'll soon talk about that. I'll speak about that in a minute.
That's the radio. That's the radio.
Yeah, but it's also neshama b'guf, and it has to impact the guf. One second, we'll get to that in a minute. Aveda edi Hashem b'gufam. The main aveda is birur hachumris, the breaking of the chumris. So these are people whose aveda, and that's why Eliyahu Navi went up the side of Shemaim with his body. Chanech is another
And he
example.
was, his mother carried him for 12 months.
And Moshe was 7 months.
Wow.
So that's Megushin. Okay,
Wow.
So their Aveda is, it's essentially a mile lamata, you could say mamat l'mayla. Sometimes Torah and Tefillah. Torah is mamsheh Torah, Tefillah is elevates. But now, what is it relevant to us? Evdi Hashem b'gufam is where Gashmis, the Keli, has an impact on the Aveda. It affects it and shapes it. Like we just said, that the Garmui, the Kelim affect the Aveda, that's the Iyu b'chayu Garmui chad. The Evdi Hashem b'nishmasam is Iyu b'chayu chad in Aveda. Because even though they are going into Kelim too, but the Ikid is not the Kelim. The Ikid is, like he says, Primis HaKelim. There's another, first is Chutzein HaKelim. Primis HaKelim means their main work is Gili. It also needs a Kelim, like he says, Evdi Hashem b'nishmasam also go into a body, and as they are in a body, they're never as high. A tzaddik is not like a mitzvah. It brings from time you pay the day. A tzaddik, even a tzaddik gomor, is still a mitzias. As he said, there's Erev Hashem v'Yoresh Hashem. A mitzvah is not a mitzias. A mitzvah is Ratzon Hashem. Period. It's not a separate thing that is loving God. It is godly will, the God's desire. So even a tzaddik.
But still, it said that he saw Kol
Yeah, but that's a separate discussion. Here we're not talking about that. Here, as a matter of fact, he's talking the other way around. The mile of Teda and Yisrael. We'll see in a second. Okay. Now, this is also through the guf, he says. So this is also through the guf. Then he goes even deeper and breaks it even further. The difference between neshama and Teda mitzvahs. Even by Evdi Hashem ben Nishmasim. So you see the same two ideas again. So we just said that the Evdi Hashem b'gufim is Evdi Gamur. We'll get back to that. But we're talking about Evdi Hashem b'nishmasim. So what's the difference between a neshama without Teda mitzvahs and a neshama with Teda mitzvahs? So the answer is there's the two daughters in Havai, Havai Tata and Havai Delayel. And a neshama can bring energy, light, illuminate even a dark place. But to transform darkness to light, Havai Yegiya Choshech, he says, there you need even a higher energy. That is the Teda mitzvahs concept. So neshama on its own, radiate, he said, brings down energy even from Dagis Gavayas, but it's all ha'ara, a reflection. Shach Teda mitzvahs is Hamshach Atzmis. Ma'ilamato. And that's what creates the bittul amiti through transforming. And here's where he brings that. Tzadi Gomor, Eved Hashem b'yirav ha'ava, but I know that he's still not bottled the Metzias Lagamri, because he's still a Metzias, he's still in existence. So that's what Teda mitzvahs is. And this is the difference in Ovis and Matan Teda. So he's all bringing it back here, and then we'll go back to you with Garmu Echad. What's Ovis and Matan Teda? Matan Teda, Ovis is like the Evdi Hashem b'nishmasam, but without mitzvahs. It's not mitzvah v'esed. They're doing, we're not talking about mitzvahs milah, but we're talking, they're doing everything, Beruchnis, whatever, he doesn't spell it out, but the bottom line is their thing was to L'choyres Elam. You know, L'choyres Elam is a chilik imid. So here's the difference. Their role was L'choyres Elam, but there's a difference. One way is, you illuminate, so the world shouldn't be a concealer, or shouldn't conceal the divine. That's a whole different thing. So the others would be, as we learned with Kel Shaddai, they did the most to bring God, the consciousness, divine consciousness, back into existence, without any chsadim, as he said. So there's no room for any type of uniqueness. Like after the Chet Tzadas. But what they did was that the world shouldn't conceal. But to say they transform it and that it cannot conceal ever again, that's not correct. That's not their power. That's, so what we have here is Evdi Hashem b'nishmosim, here we have like this. So Evdi Hashem b'nishmosim aveda is Iyu v'chayu v'chav. Elokus is an aid, but it's an aid that on its own radiates into the world, but not transforms. Then Torah Mitzvahs adds an element that transforms.
So that's what Moshe was like that, like the elbows before Moshe.
Well, Moshe at both levels.
Before Sinai. No, before Sinai, he was like the elbows then.
Or a little harder maybe, but ultimately, of course, Matan Torah is. Yeah, Moshe was also. But Moshe it helps bring Matan Torah into the picture. You could split Moshe into two, into before and after, for sure.
Which means if they're vitamin
You even see after Luchas Shnias, he's even higher than Luchas Shneas. It's
if they're vitamin Shmosam, they have to be constantly there in order to affect the world. The second they disappearing, nothing happens.
He doesn't say that, but that could be another nafkamina, yeah. Because they don't leave a permanent impact, exactly. The cheft is not transformed. You could say that. Yeah, but they leave their children, they leave the legacy, they leave what they taught. Yeah. He doesn't say that, but it's mashma like that also, because his sapcha is actually transformation. But you need it. Now, this is Evdei Hashem Nishmas. Hashem Evdei Hashem Begufam. I'm reading from the middle of Shem Vav. Ha'era l'ki hi bo ba'akshama. So you see, so this is not a tangent at all. He's just bringing the whole idea into a bit. What Begufam? Begufam, the Eir Elki is Hakshama. But in Evdei Hashem Nishmasam, even if they don't have the Torah mitzvahs, they have a body and they have containers, but the containers are, like you said, primis akin. They're transparent, essentially.
It's like the sun.
In a sense, yeah. Well, here, however, the Eir really now is going into Kalim, and that's its purpose, is to get into the Kalim, and now they're becoming materialized. That's just that. So I'll just read from here, and we'll go from here. You see the line I'm up to? The line starts Hashem b'nishmas. Hashem can Evdei Hashem b'gufam. Huh?
He starts reading with the finish line.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Hashem can Evdei Hashem b'gufam. Here they'll keep over him b'aksham. I'm going to go faster because I learned this right. Gam can I do the kus al adei aveda. Yigiyesh lehem. So just like the other one we said, right? Evdei Hashem b'nishmas. They also are inside of bodies, but there the body doesn't conceal; it just is a channel that reveals. Here it's the other way around. And even though they're also revealing other kusa through their avedi yigiyah, his work and his exertion, shapel and bira b'zichur kanav shabam is that they pale the refinement and the refinement and the cleansing and the refinement of the animal soul. Nevertheless, it comes back sham. The kashem shaguf master le'ed nishmasan kamekin hariu master le'el just like their bodies conceal the air of their neshama, here you don't just have like a moisture, like a translucent or transparent flow. There is a concealment, same thing. So therefore, their goof also conceals on the lakus that they're drawing down.
Well, it's not a bad.
So remember we said Chiyuv just reveals godliness. There's no concealments. Here there is a concealment. That's the purpose. There should be a concealment. And that's so even with their Aveda, Shagam, that also their Aveda, with their Nikvus Begeshem means they're contained by, they're grasped by, they're bound by the Geshem, by the Mitzvah, by the matter, which that's the whole idea of the Hashem Begufo. That means those that serve with their bodies, they're manifesting in the body. The godly divine, the divine energy comes in some form of substance and matter. It would be like the equivalent of learning Torah, where you learn Torah, it's Torah. It's Torah Eid. You learn Torah, you're learning the ideas of what God wants in the Torah. You do a mitzvah, no matter how you twist it, you need to have the physical thing. A mitzvah, you must hold on to the lulav in this. You have to eat the matzah. You put on the film. There's a hakshama going on. So that's not the key. But the purpose is that it should come hakshama. In Torah, you don't have quite that. I mean, there's elements of Torah that's coming into your mind, into your words, into your writing, and so on. But it doesn't. Here we're talking about elikus that comes into a real keli, hakshama. The kolshke b'kol asinyan islapshus hanashama b'guf. Harei hanashama nasa b'hakshama k'fi efen every effort. This is even for those that serve with the gufa. For sure, the rest of us, when the neshama comes to the body, the erev neshama becomes hakshama. Like he's going back to the beginning of the point. This is iyu v'gamoyecha. The erev is becoming manifest in the body. Now the body is in control. What dominates? The body's evarim, the body's arms and legs and limbs and organs and faculties shape the neshama's impact on this world. In other words, think of it this way. When you look with your eyes at the street or anything outside, you don't see elikus. You see a physical world. Evdei Hashem v'nishmasim, you could say when they open their eyes, they see elikus everywhere. The divine. The world doesn't, the gashmis of this world doesn't conceal. It means the gashmis of their eye, in a way, is not concealing the elikus that they can see. But us, it's not that way. The body becomes a true filter that blocks the flow, and what you see primarily is gashmis. Same thing, what you hear is gashmis. So you could say Takat Tzaddik, who we spoke earlier, Evdei Hashem v'nishmasim, they also have a body, but their body is simply a tool for them to bring elikus into this world. Like they say, eyes you could see, but eyes also bring light. When Moshe Rabbeinu looked at Eretz Yisrael, the Rambam Rebbe says, he refined it. It wasn't just a sightseeing thing. He changed Eretz Yisrael. It made it easier for them to be capable. Yeah.
That's quantum.
It's a lofty thing because wasn't the Eibishter told him to go up in Mount. He was interested in a sightseeing tour of Eretz Yisrael.
Very good.
Moshe wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, says to Mekayim Mitzvah.
I always wondered about that.
Yeah, that's what he says. He made it the kavod. Look, the Rebbe looked at all the chassidim in the last circus.
Oh.
It wasn't just look. The Ramban, by the way, I remember then when the Rebbe was looking, someone told me there's a Ramban at the beginning of Bamidbar. Ramban asked the question, says, why you count, why does the Eibishter count the Eden all the time? Ramban asked a simple question, since when is counting a sign of love? What you count? I mean, obviously people count money and other things. He said, because when you count, you have to look at it. And looking each one, that's the love. He said, looking at it is, counting means you go one by one. You can't just say.
Then it goes to Sipur, then it goes to the whole.
It says that's what it says. The Ramban says that looking at the Eibishter, looking at the Eden when he counts them, is the It was a Chassidic Shirida.
So why was it done through
What about those?
So Dr. Rashi would say it was a Russian.
I don't remember what he writes the whole thing, but that's what he says. He said, what the Chlivosim and counting,
No, why was it done through an object? Not. There's also the Sakona here, something.
I guess maybe to
No, the union of Bain Hora, something.
We learned before the whole thing. There's two counting. There's the counting with Kedusha, the counting in Klippa. That's where we don't count people. But when it's with Kedusha, we spoke about this the whole thing with Misper. The Misper becomes like a mild Misper. Huh? Yeah, the Shalom. As dark, Esher darker than this. Also darker than this. Yeah. So it's all clear. It's two types of Misper. The second Misper is why there's Misper. That's the Kasha. You find that we don't count people. Then the Torah, you say you do count. You said the Torah because it's a count from the Mila. So that count is focusing not on the Kamus. When you count Kamus, that's considered a 9 part. Because you're focusing on Geshem. When you count Ruchnius, quantity. Quality, when we spoke there about the Mispah, that when a person counts, you just count the number. Doesn't really appreciate the quality of what he's counting. You say 1,000,000. What does 1,000,000 mean? It means nothing. Just a symbol. If someone actually sits and counts 1,000,000 things, there's a primitive element that he relates to what he's counting. Like the Kodesh said, like seeing. Anyway, going back to this, the way the eyesight, however, or other faculties work, for most of us, is the other way around. The Evri Aguf cause Hakshama in the Keiches. It's actually a very powerful way to understand how tzaddik see things. In other words, actually their arms, their legs, their eyes and ears are all there, but instead of taking and filtering and turning into a Gashmistic experience, it just channels. Yeah.
That's why you need a Rebbe. Some people saying that they don't need a Rebbe, they go in directly to the Eibishter. You need the Rebbe, he's seeing it in a different
There's
way.
going to be a point when we're going to be able to do it.
Okay. Now we go back. This we learned already, but I'm going to just go quickly. The example of all this is above. Remember, this was an example. He started Al Derech Moshe at the beginning, the sixth line at the beginning of the chapter 155. This is all an example for Guf and Nefesh. What is it, Lamaila? This is Ir. So Lamaila, Ir v'garmoyechat. What is it, Lamaila? In that he, you,
Him.
him and his garmui are one. Sha'er bo b'slapshus v'tisa ba'keli. That the air, the energy, the light, manifests. In that it's contained, is bound in the container. And it's chitzenis hakeli. This is chitzenis hakeli.
Where it comes out.
Shemakbilim es'er bo b'akshom b'kfi musa hakeli. They limit the light, the energy, and it becomes materialized according to the personality of the container.
Why not Pnimi Sekele?
That's what comes in.
Leave the table.
The Kamoy b'nefeshi ne'evdi Hashem b'nishmasim adugman is l'malachins pnimi sakeh. And b'nefesh evdi Hashem b'nishmasim, that's pnimi sakeh. She's galos ha'er v'hu she'en nitfus. Because there, pnimi sakeh, the primary thing is that it's just a filter, not a filter, it's just a channel, I would say, for the energy.
Come into the cave.
And it's not nitfus, it's not bound. And it's higher than itself, like he says in Nageres HaKedesh. When he says in Nageres HaKedesh that he and his containers are one, or the energies in the containers are one, that's the outer containers that create a kakshama, that allow it to create, because if you were talking Primus HaKelim, you wouldn't have a yesh. The Chetzeis HaKelim allows for the structure to emerge. The Primus HaKelim's main role is just to let the energy flow through.
Receptor light.
In Kelim itself.
It is a yesh, but it's a different kind of a yesh.
That's what we discussed. It's a body of a tzaddik. So it's just a channel for divine energy. Yeah. So that's the Kelim. But also, however, also in the air, because remember we're talking here, the air, he says, is the air in the Kelim. So it's the Chetzenis HaKelim. Also in the air is the Chetzenis HaKelim. So two things are happening here. The Kelim is the outer container that they create Hakshama, they actually materialize the energy. And also the energy, talking about the outer energy, where there you can say the containers touch it. Because the inner energy is never affected by the Hakshama. Even in our situation, the inner energy always remains, like he says, in the outer energy, you could say that it confines and limits energy. It should be like the personality of the containers. But not in Pnimi Seir. Shesham is Gabrus Ha'er. There the air is dominating. The Gama Kelim Pnimi Metzias Mamish. And there the Kelim, which Pnimi Seir Kelim, are not really in Metzias Mamish. They're still in Metzias compared to the air, but they're not, they don't have that element of actually, let's call it, what Magashim is that, Fagdeb. They don't, let's see how do you say Fagdeb? Fagdeb something. They make it coarse. Like you can have a light that's shining so powerfully that it goes right through, transparent through any container. Or you can have something that's opaque, like a curtain or something, just as an example, where the container is actually diminishing or concealing or limiting the flow of the energy. That would be like Chetzenis HaKelim.
So this is already in the Eir Mislavish Vakeli. He's saying that Pnimi Seir is even the Eir Mislavish Vakeli.
Yeah, even the pashtus, yes. Which would be like Evdei Hashem and Ishmael. They also are Mislavish in the Keli, but the Keli does not regard.
If the Keli has Euros, the Ketzonis and the Bemis are the same. But at that level of Euros, the uros, when it goes through, then the pneumis and
What level of what?
the uros, when
What's your house?
the transparent.
Behirus.
The heroes.
Oh, the heroes.
So then they'll both do the same, pneumis and the tzonis. That
We
point.
discussed it earlier.
Yeah.
It's, ultimately, as the outer containers and the physical world become refined, they become they become refined enough to let all the air through. That's the ultimate goal.
So,
But it doesn't begin with that. You have to go through the steps of refining it. But just like with the mind, as you become more attuned to something, you become more refined and you can understand things that are far more spiritual than you thought understood yesterday. Your physical gashmis is becoming more refined. Now, Kiyudua, Sheyesh Shema, that's what we stopped here actually. But here he now says Kiyudua. He's explaining now this with an example, with an idea that will help understand the difference.
1 second. The Oida Hashem and the Shmasam, they have its Primisa are flowing through Primisa Kalim.
Yeah, basically.
Also, the R is the higher level.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah. Well, Primis Ha'er is their neshama, and Primis Ha'kelim is their guf. Their guf is like Primis Ha'kelim.
What's
That's how you would say. Because it's just really just letting the air through. That's what it says. By us, meaning regular people, you'd say the Chetzenes Keli is the dominating. You also have a Primis Keli, but it's not as effective, or active, I would say. And then you have also a Chetzenes Keli, which is the dominant, and the Primis Keli is also not active until we make it active. Ukidua, like it's known, there's 3 types of names, descriptions. We've learned this much later. Yeah. 285. Chapter 285. Now is the first time somewhere. So what does Shem Etzem? Let's just translate. Shem Etzem means the name of the core entity. Okay? Shema Tayad is a description. Tayad means description. Pu'ula, Shema Pu'ula is its function. So you can there's 3 names on something. You can call what is it? What is its description? You have, like, for example, the name of the product, its description, and its function. Any spec, whenever you buy something, you always have these 3 things. There's other shemas I should add. There's a shema mushal. That would be like a what do you call it? A nickname. And there's also sometimes you have another name called shema kinui. Kinui is somewhat like mushal, not as much.
Kinui.
Yeah, kinui is like a nickname. Shema mushal is more like a borrowed term. You can't really call it something, so you call it by a different name. Just to give for the record, if you go to other places, you'll find those 2. But here he's talking these 3.
Honest, it's not really a borrowed term when we say something's righteous.
Yeah, okay.
It's honest.
Well, like what my grandmother would say, oh, it's tzaddik. She's usually when you did a lot of trouble.
It's not even lashes.
Okay, so what's the difference? And this is going to explain to us what we're discussing now with Iyu v'chayu. The Shema Etzem b'chins Etzem E'er Shalomel Adayim Eslapsh. Okay. Shema Etzem is referring to the Etzem E'er that's higher than being manifested containers. I don't want to jump to conclusions what level that is. Let's first read it through. Shema Teya, description, descriptive name. U'pnimis E'er Shemislab b'chins Pnimis E'er. So this is that's already Pnimis E'er that's manifesting in the inner container. Shalzen Nemar Yohiv Chachmasa L'Chakimim. This is in Daniel, I believe. Give wisdom to the wise. The Chachmasa B'chins Etzem E'er, Yohiv Chachmasa L'Chakimim, Hanu L'Chakimim Be'etzem B'chins Pnimis E'er. Ba'keli Shein Adayin Lifim. How's he types this? Yohiv Chachmasa L'Chakimim Etzem E'er. That's the Etzem E'er that's higher than Keli. Yohiv Chachmasa, you give that Etzem E'er to Chakim and Hanu to the Pnimis E'er, Ba'keli Shein Adayin Lifim. Like it says elsewhere. Why is it important Shein Adayin Lifim?
That's insignificant.
So in other words, it's not yet for a function. So you're saying like this. What means you give wisdom to the wise? What does that mean? He's wise already. What are you giving him wisdom? But because he's wise and he has his previous Akeli are so refined, so you're giving him the wisdom of the Etzem Ha'er. Interesting. Okay, so in other words, even the Etzem Ha'er also has a place to the Etzem would be Iyu, the Pashtus. The Iyu that goes into Chayui, which is seemingly that's what he said. Shema Pa'ula, okay, so we covered the first two, Shema Etzem and Shema Toya. What about the functional name, the name of the function, Shema Pa'ula? Hu b'chitzenis HaKelim, that's in the outer containers, Hamal Bishim l'chitzenis Ha'er, they enclose the outer dimension of energy, Shu lifta Pa'ula Saisabas. That's in order to affect creation. That's really a creation force. Very nice. So remember we spoke about Eir as being, expressing and revealing the divine. So think of it this way. If I'm going to express myself, I'll speak, I'll share what's inside of me. So there's an etzem within me. And it's being expressed through the Primus HaKelim and Primus Ha'er. But if I'm going to go now and build something, let's say build a house, or build an object, a machine, that already is a functional thing that's coming out, that's already manifesting Vakshomit into a particular thing. In other words, you can use this example with everybody. If you see somebody craft an object, what does that reveal about the person? It just reveals he has the power to craft. You know very little about the person. But when he speaks, or he teaches, or he writes, or he expresses himself, then you know what's going on inside. So there's the Etzem Ha'er, that's what's before the Kelim. There's the Primus Ha'er, Primus HaKelim. There's Chetzenis Ha'er, Chetzenis HaKelim, which create. It's actually a very good model for almost anything.
Okay. But I understand the first and the last. I don't understand in the middle. You said
the Etzem Ha'er would be who you are without any expression.
That's what I understand also the function.
No, but the revealing who you are, the Etzem, before expression, can you express that? So you could. Not through an action, you express it through words. In other words, all of us have a dimension that's beyond expression. It's like your inner deepest feelings, your intimate, even that can be expressed to some extent in the Primus Ha'er and Primus HaKelim. Words, when you talk words from the heart. Obviously, it's not Etzem Ha'er Mamish, but it's Chachmas Elochakim. That's what he's saying. Yeah, in other words, the difference between when you speak from your heart to someone you care about and when you build a kaida. That's what it is.
It's like the UK Bob and the Shem Havaya almost.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. It's V'ayim Asher is part of the common Dava Yikuli Truma. That's second volume, like he says, page 8-7. He has the second classes up to that.
So that means
Yeah,
They're far advanced.
exactly. That's why I said it. I know it this morning. So I just said that.
That's what the Yikuli Truma.
when he came to here, he had already planned out the whole entire thing. Because he's writing via Mashiach's world with common.
Yeah, but he could have written this later.
Yeah, the parentheses was added.
That doesn't mean it's parentheses, doesn't mean anything. The pashtus he wrote is not in the first, there's 4 drafts in my opinion. He's most likely wrote in the second or third. That doesn't mean he didn't have it all figured out. That doesn't mean the structure of the Maimorim were yet there. You clearly see that the whole thing is not written randomly. I mean, you see clearly a plan. You see what we're learning now, the Primus HaKelim can be already learned earlier. I don't even remember what chapter now. I didn't want to go there. We learned about Primus HaKelim.
Yeah.
Not really in touch with that much.
Completely about it.
Yeah, no, it was more than
I don't know.
You know where it was? I know now. By the end of Mispur and Sipur and Sapir, so he said first Sapir is Primus HaKelim, because Primus HaKelim is Behirus. Then he goes even deeper that Sapir is Eir itself. Yeah, very fitting. I mean, yeah, so there, what do you say there? Taka Sapir, complete transparency. That's what we're talking about. End of Sapir, the end of Sapir. No, not Yom Chachmas, no, it was not mentioned. Remember? The same place? Maybe. Let me just see. I'll look right now. I know exactly where it is. It's chapter. At the end of a minor. last chapter, I think, in this matter. I left the union of Libun, of Levant, of white. It's around chapter Kuf Chaf Aleph, Kuf Chaf Beis. I don't remember exactly. Maybe a drop earlier. No, here. Kuf Design, 160. Very clear. So the Kelim are called Gufim. See? Page 225, Besh Chafei.
Yeah, it's up there. It's,
Okay. Good.
it's Pnim Sakel Yisav Sishmai. It's Pnim Sakel in the Yisav Sishmai.
You read the end.
5 lines from that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
The Meir B'chinas Etzemeh. Yeah, so this is connected. What we're learning now is connected to the end of that Maimon there.
Oh, wait, one more round of that. Shemay, because that's a making, because Pnim Sakel is how it's Shmon Shabbos Shemay was going to do. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Very consistent. I know. And it's also the same Havana. So the whole point there that he was discussing, remember, is the third level of third meaning in spirits. The whole point was the third meaning in spirit was that it's a Bahirus, completely transparent. So first Primus Akelim, first he speaks about the Chetzenis Akelim. Then he goes to Primus, then he goes to Eid itself, then all the way to Eid HaKesef. And all the way in Kesef. So the whole climate needed the good connections here. Wow. Okay. So let's continue. Reserve the beginning of the well, this is what it says in the three worlds, the three macrocosmic worlds of Biyah. Nikra Atzilus Adam Dasiya the close. So we've discussed this many times. That there's that. There's the macrocosmic and microcosmic of Atzilus of Biyah. So when you talk macrocosmic, the big picture, what's Atzilus? The Proteus. It's Asiya the close, the lowest level. So Nikra Atzilus Adam Asiya the close. Atzilus is called the word, the Adam Dasiya, the man of Asiya, of the macrocosm.
He says all of the Biyah, not only Asiya. Biyah the close, Nikra.
Yeah, so Atzilus then is called Asiya the close, Biyah. Close. The Asiya begins Keich Nibdal. Asiya is a Keich Nibdal. When you build something, as I just said, it's already a detached power. When you speak, it's still called attached because you cannot say words if it's not coming out of the mouth of the speaker. Machshava is called Mamish one. So the Zulavush HaMu'uchid is called Machshava. The Nifrid is called Dibba, but it's not really Nifrid because it's not connected. The Kreich Nifdal is nice. When you build something, you can build something and then move away from it. The ability to do something outside of yourself. So what's a Kreich Nifdal? The Eikru B'chins Chetzenis Akelim. That's why Adam is called Asir the Klal, because Atzilus is already beginning to create, and the Ikr, the primary power of it, is the outer containers of Atzilus.
Because that's a Kavan.
Like he said in Ageres HaKedesh, Shebehen V'Yod Livra Yesh Mayim, through what? With the Kelim of Atzilus. So that's why Atzilus is called Asir in this context. But Inyan, this is the Nibasi, is based in Yan. To explain this, the Inyan of this is that Nasi in action, there's two things. The first thing is Chabrus Keich the connection with the power to affect, to create. Like a craftsman who builds a container, who builds a vessel. Shebesasa Asiyah, during the creation of it, during the crafting of it, Hakeli Bischabus in Keichapel. The container, for example, when he's, let's say, shaping, let's say a potter is taking clay and making a pot, right? So while he's making it, he has to be touching it. He can't be doing it from a distance. So there's a schabus, there's a connection between him and this. If he stops touching the container and shaping it, whatever, that could be anything, taking a gem, a stone, the rough, diamond in the rough, shaping you need a schabus. You take away the schabus, the connection, the attachment, the container will not be finished. The second thing in Asiyah, that after he finished, and after he separates and becomes detached from the power of creation, that's when you really see the real action. In other words, while you're still crafting it, you don't really see the product, because it's still being shaped. When do you see the actual product? After you remove your hands, and now you leave it on the table, say, here's what I built. So there's two stages, essentially. One is while he's building it, he has to be touching it. And second, for it to be really visible, it separates, and then you see the kid. Like with throwing a stone.
That was
So let's say you're holding the stone, you haven't thrown it yet. Then, you're still attached. Yes, without that, the stone is not flying anywhere, because the stone doesn't have any power to fly. It's not a flying stone. But when do you see the pool? Only once it's removed, once you detach, once you start throwing, once it's gone from your hand. So it's interesting. So it still remains connected. He's trying to explain here the interface between something that's already separate, but it still has that connection, because it wouldn't have, the action can't happen without the attachment. It's a very interesting example. I don't remember seeing it anywhere else, actually.
And also the action cannot happen while you're attached.
Right, exactly. Correct.
But
And also, or definitely not nikir. You said. Only when the stone leaves his hand is visible and can you discern the action.
Only when it's left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Atzilus we call Asiyah, it's the second level. And Atzilus is Asiyah, the Klolos. He's talking about the second level that Atzilus is already, which is, like he's going to say, is going to be the Chetzenis Kelim. Atzilus is Asiyah, is the second level, not because as long as it's still in the so-called divine hand, it's the power to create. But if you want to actually create, you need to let go. So Atzilus has that outer level of Atzilus. Is that when you say Atzilus is Asiyah, you're talking about the outer dimension. Look at the Isa, the Sefer HaBoyer. Oh, this we also learned. Very nice. As it says, the Sefer HaBoyer, not L'Tzurelis, the Zarkon. He took, what do we call it? Pebbles. The Zarkon and threw them. This we had earlier, actually marked here, chapter 54 and chapter 153. Top of the page. The Koyal Atzilus B'chlal. What does he mean? He took stones, took pebbles and threw them. And with that he created, I believe it said that he created Shemayim with that. That's the created from Dalit. It's nice to we learned all this. We mastered all the facts. Master, I don't think anybody masters. They're right there on top.
Oh, look what I found.
Look at him, Nasa Haaretz.
Look what I found. Yeah, well, I was like,
Where?
something.
Is it the same technique? Whatever works.
Sounds like fly.
Oh, it's an end of the mime. I thought it was the end of the mime. Now I remember that time. Yeah, I think it's not connected to this.
You see it? Yes, the carcass so that I can dump it.
How far down? Yeah. Now. Oh, actually, it's not just there. It's before. He talks about Paraduma. Yeah, I think that's what I do. There's about, okay, yeah. Now I remember, okay. Check it out later, maybe something.
Did you remember what we said the afterwards before?
I remember when you said it, I didn't remember the details. I don't know if it's connected, maybe it's a different context. Okay, so nothing says, what does it say? That God took pebbles and threw them, and from that came earth. Earth, not Shemayim. Hey, it's Tzaddik Chas, right? Is it the same context?
Yeah, it's a little bit different.
Okay, I understand. So anyway, so he took pebbles and threw them, and from that came earth. What's the mashal? What kind of mashal is that? Because he wants to show the creation of something that's separate from and detached from the source. So that's Asiyah. And that's referring to Atzilus, the second level. Okay. Because in Atzilus, that's where you have Caleb. Before Atzilus, as we know, there's no real Caleb. In Toyu, the Kalim are being shattered. In Akudim, there's only one Kalim. Where's the real primary place of Kalim? It's in Atzilus. So that's why Atzilus is the place that through it becomes creation, through it become the pebbles. The throwing, like he says, the second element, not the attachment. Obviously, by Sadam Amoris Nibra Elam, that God spoke and said, Yehi Eir. When he spoke and said, Yehi Eir, you could say that's the first level. He's still holding the stone in his hand. And then by here, when it actually becomes Eir, he's thrown the stone, and through that became Eretz. And that's a good way to put it, because God's actually spoke it, so there is an element where it's still, the Uman, the worker, is still touching and shaping the creation. And then there's how he releases it, so to speak. It's a release.
The divine is going to be a release. This is not funny.
It's a mashal. It's a hell of a
Tanya also that when a person talks, his word becomes separate.
Yeah, but it's all a mashal. It's an example just for us to understand. It comes down to concealment. That's what it really comes down. Obviously, and when you throw a stone, the stone is not part of you. In this case, God throws it. The Natul says, "V'Zarkan," is that the head of Eretz of earth feels separate from the hand. And that's what
That's very important clarification to give on.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Remember, because it was a whole base that everything is a moshel. So when you say Sotaka, but for someone who knows the Medrash, not to say this, how do they learn it? Without this, they either have to be Megash in it.
So
What they have to say is it's a moshel.
No, Sarkon is to throw. Srodas. Stones, like Srodas or rocks.
These Mesholim are also part of
Pebbles.
You want to understand the divine in the world. It's all
Sarkon
I
and
also
threw
God.
throw.
So say it's the example.
Natal is he
Of
collected
throwing
the
a stone,
top.
he created something that we don't
Natal
feel
on the top of
attachment.
the first line. The end of the
That's what
first
you
line.
could say.
So-
They feel how God is holding the stone.
And stones,
That's
pebbles,
what you could
the Zarkon,
say. See
threw
what I'm
them.
saying? They feel as the stone is flying that this is a power of the divine. We can convince ourselves the stone is flying, and earth is moving, the sun is rising. That's what we think every day. People say, I was just listening to, who gave me the Christopher? I listened to it. I don't like him so much. I think it could have been far better. That other guy could have beaten him big time because he wasn't so good. He said a few lines, but some things he really put his foot in his mouth.
Yeah, well, he was sick. Maybe he was sick.
No, he wasn't sick. He was
Bothered.
it's representing atheism because he did get him when he said to him like the only bad things religious people do, and nothing good comes from that. Yeah, That was a very good point I like. The point I'm trying to make is that it's very easy to live in this world and think. If you saw a stone flying right now, would anyone say the stone's flying on its own? Nobody. You say someone threw it, I just don't see the person. Here we see a sun rising, a moon rising, the earth functioning, stones flying all over the place. The whole solar system is flying. And no, it's flying on its own. It's fascinating that we have this disconnect because that's the hell. So if Hashem and Nishmasam, when they look with their eyes, they see the connect, they see the power of a divine power throwing. We look, we see a yesh, and we think it's a kapus machet. Sam Shapozbek, right? Another story. Guy stole the tefillin. They caught him with the tefillin. the guy. So they didn't know who he is and what to send. He said, what's this? He said, Sam Shaposh, I'm also a shoemaker. He thought it was, leather. Necha Shuchmach.
That's where it comes from?
Yeah.
I've always used it. That's
Yeah, Sam Shaposh. Yeah. I was with the guy Yosef Strutsky in the Pesach. Black River Parade. I think it was Tavshin Lamed maybe. Black River Parade. He says he was this cool guy riding around on a motorcycle. Okay. The Rebbe saw him and all that. Not labeled Strutsky, like Yosef. So by the Fabrengen, the Rebbe called his father, says, "Who is the son?" So he points to the label. He says, "Man, the Glavne Knacker." I said, "With the Glavne Knacker." You know the Glavne? This is a
Chief.
Chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a sophisticated.
Glavni comes from the word head.
So all Pesach I was saying to Glavne Knacker.
Glavni.
He told me once that another man not without the new.
Yeah, that's another thing.
That's a Kanaka. It's got
But that's not
$100,000
that.
on Pesach.
It's got a lesson for
That's
that.
Kanaka to me.
This when you go to shul this Shabbos, you say, Glavne Knacker.
And the very small.
Yeah.
That's a big bracha, maybe. You got a big bracha.
The way they never fled, the Glavne Knacker. The motorcycle was like. So we were waiting here. But
She said the Ikea is saying it's a failing. That would be so.
Effect creation for sure, because look, it's the paradox is this: if you want something outside of you, you have to conceal the inside, or else there's no way it can emerge. That's how it is. Like yesh can't become a yesh if it's constantly aware of its source. It's just not possible in our ability. So, but there's a purpose. It's not standard. That's why Eir doesn't make it yet. That's why Eir has to be mislavish b'iyuv v'garmuyachad shebehen v'ayodam yivur. That's the whole point to get us the Kaddish. That's why you need the Kalim.
That's why you need the oil also. You know that the feeling, the end should become.
Yeah, of course.
Obvious.
Batzilus gufa bezin yonima now zeh b'chinas hamalchut.
That's why you need
So Natzilus itself, these two things, these two levels. One, how it's still asiyah, attached to the shaper, to the crafter, maker, and second, how it's detached and separate. These things is how Malchus Kameshi Batzilus Shi B'chinas Ischabus B'Yitzachtus. That's how Malchus is still in Atzilus and it's in a state of Ischabus, connected and Ischabus united. Well, Kameshi Nasa, the second is Kameshi Nasa B'chinas Malchus L'Biyah, how Malchus becomes a source for B'Yitzir Asiyah HaPratik. Shanasa B'chinas Nipul. That something becomes and feels separate. So these are two levels in Malchus, and in general, in the Kelim of Esesiris in general, that's the Chetzenis HaKelim. So you have in Atzilus itself, you're already preparing the ground for the next stage. Okay.
So both
That
levels
you had
are
to-
in Malchus.
What?
Both levels are in Malchus.
One is Malchus as it's Atzilus, one is on Malchus how it becomes the Bokar of Biyah, or in the Kelim of Atzilus itself, it's Chetzenis HaKelim and Primus HaKelim. This is the unity of him, he, and his energy in the containers are one. And that's the unity of Yiv Chamui is in order for there to be creation, because you cannot create, as we just said, if there is no Achdus. That's very nice. In other words, you need to first have that the Uman, the craftsman, the worker, is touching and shaping the existence. So you need the Achdus. So it has both elements, Iyuv v'Gamur Echad. Iyuv v'Gamur Echad, on one hand, you have the Achdus, but you also have a Keli that is affecting the Eir, because it has to conceal and hide it. The Yisraelis HaMetzias, there should be a Metzias that should become a Metzias that will become detached. So in Atzilus, it's still Iyuv v'Gamur Echad. That's the whole Azayah. Kun is saying in Atzilus Iyuv v'Gamur Echad. In Bria, it doesn't say Iyuv v'Gamur Echad. In Bria, Iyuv v'Chayu and Iyuv v'Gamur are not Chad. You don't say that anymore.
It's after it does go.
Correct. But the beginning of letting go is in Atzilus, because Atzilus is the maker, is the builder. Yeah, that's why it's called Asir. So the lower dimension of Atzilus is so-called the release.
So the real interface is Malchus, that's this.
If you break it into detail, yeah. Or generally Atzilus B'chla. That is where you okay. Mashenkin Yibechayuicha, the Yuzel, B'chinas Eirin Sef HaPlikul HaMesachim HaEiris. Mashenkin, by contrast, Yibechayuicha, that he and his energy is one. That's Eirin Sef HaPlikul. That's the first track. That's Blikul. That's infinite energy and light that becomes one with the energies. There the Yichud is not in order to create, in order to shape something outside of it. There the Yichud is an opposite. The Yisraelui. There it's actually more to attach than to separate. Here the attachment is in order to be able to throw the rock, so to speak, or to build the Zrik, Zorka. There the Yisraelui becomes Chayushi, Meir becomes Etzemeh. There the Yichud is the opposite in that track. That the Eir, the outer dimension, so-called, of the Eir, should be attached with the Ihu, Etzema Eir. In other words, how Primis HaKelim, like the Shem HaTeyad, becomes one with the Shem HaEtzem. Whereas Gamui is Shem HaPula, using that expression. So in other words, here now, we said that the Primis HaEir becomes one with the Etzem Eir, Kumashi is bar, as we shall discuss. Through that, there will be a Gila, a revelation that's without any limits.
Then it won't be
Let's talk about Yivu Chayuri. We're not talking Yivu Chayuri. What's that? Speaking. The Eris Hayim Boim B'chinas Midah V'Kvul. Because the Eris, as we said, we're talking about track 1. The Eris, we said, come in a form of Midah V'Kvul Chesed and Vura. That's what Shir Atzmei B'Kayah, that's how he envisioned it. That's how in other words, basically you want to say that Ir B'Chayurcha is a Yichud that's going this way, up, back to Etzem, and Ir B'Gamurcha is a Yichud going this way, down to detachment. That's what he's saying here. So because those Eiris on their own are Midah V'Gvul. And that, because of that, that's how they'll be the diminishing level to level until those energies will manifest the containers to create. What's the point making here? That the Eiris, even the Eiris Agvul, that will ultimately go down, are also connecting and uniting to their source. There should be a Gilish Shalei B'Agvul. So even the Chesed of Eir HaChesed, Eir HaGvura, should be connected to the Eir HaGlibul, which was Shir Atzmei B'Kayach. You understood what I just said?
No.
Remember, we'll be talking 2 tracks here. There's the track of Yivu Chayucha, there's Eir and Gili Atzmus. It's revealing. It's a revealing power. That revealing power has a dimension where God says, in visions, I want to have 10 spheres. Why? That's track number 2. You want structure. You want something that's separate. Something that is a yesh. So you have the containers that are like the skeleton. Those energies from track 1, the second level, that become Eir HaGvul, will manifest into the Keich HaGvul of the Kelim, will create resistance, correct? Now we have 2 Yichudim going on here.
Not only the Keich,
The first
the
Yichud,
Eiris that are in Mislavshim Kelim.
just said that. Yeah. The Eiris Mislavshim. So now we have 2 Yichudim here. One is that Yivu V'Gamui Echad, he is one with the Eir of the Kelim, which are no Gamui. Yivu V'Gamui Echad. And that purpose is to create. So there's a unity going on there, the unity that he needs, that the craftsman needs to be touching, or so-called connected to the thing that's going to shape, even though it's going to become something separate. Then there's a Yichud, Yivu V'Chayuchad. It's saying that Eir, even the Eir that goes into the Kelim, Eir HaGvul, Eir HaChesed, Eir HaGvura, is, and that gets diminished as it goes downward, also has a connection to the Ihu, which is Eir HaGlibul. And connected to that, and that Yichud infuses the Eir HaGvul with Eir HaGlibul. That's what he's saying. So you have, basically, the Eir becomes the Eir HaGvul that goes to the Kelim and creates. That's Eir V'Gamui. Then there's the Eir. That Eir also has another element And it's a Shem HaTeya for the Shem HaEtzem,
Which is a Oyer Blik.
which is Eira Blikul, Eira Etzem. That's higher than Kelim altogether. That's what he's saying here.
And
He's a key bridge right here. I mean, he's saying, it says Befed, it's not my explanation. That's what the Ilu. Okay, the Zerah Hefresh.
So what is the Oyer Mislavish Bekelim? This is already in Biyah.
No, it's not Atzilus. We're talking everything. Iyu v'chayu echad, Iyu v'gav echad, it's only in Atzilus. Kalim and Eidus of Atzilus are one with God. The Kalim have one type of Yichud, the Eidus have another. So say Kalim, we include Eidus within Kalim.
The Pa'ula is Biyah.
Pool is Biyah.
The stone flying is Biyah.
The Kayach HaPool is Atzilus. Yeah, the thrower is Atzilus. The flying stone is Biyah. It's a Malchus is Biyah. Malchus is Atzilus. Because even while the throwing, the power is coming from the thrower. It doesn't have its own power.
He's saying Atzilus now, he's saying Atzilus.
Here it's talking about Atzilus, the regular practice is Asiyah the
Right.
It's Asiyah the clothes.
Is that saying about the Kalim of Atzilus and what?
It says it in the words.
Atzilus and Moses.
Right, because it says in the
There's the
words.
ways, the air is connected to air. It's basically
Adam das the
contraction
color.
air itself. How air goes into Kalim to create, and how air remains attached to the source. And the Tikkun Hazeh is coming to tell us that there's two types of yichud going on.
It's not the same, it's the same air.
Not exactly.
It's two different eels also. That's what he's going to finish.
Yeah, that's sure.
These two dimensions are in the Oyer Mislavish Bekelim.
Let's see if my wife's taking it all right.
The first one, the Iyuv.
We still have time.
No, I see my wife took the car. I can relax.
The Iyuv Chayoyi.
Not necessarily. Chayoy is also Eid HaGvul even before it comes into Kelim. This the Esesir Sefirus is no Kelim yet.
Still
So
got
you have the
a few
concept
minutes.
of Chesed. That also needs a unification with where it's coming from, where its roots. Okay. But they say Yibkin Sagil Shalei Ba'akbal. The Eid Sari Hein Boim B'chins B'chins By the Yichud, the Yibkin Chayoy Shayes, Gil Shalei Ba'akbal. Zeh after Ben Yibkin Chayoy Chad, the Yibkin Moichad. This is the difference between the two. And there's energies are one, and he and his kelim are one, or he and the energies inside the kelim are one. The Iyu, Amisachadim Gamoy, is Ebchins Kechad Moshe. The Iyu, the Elokus that is united with God Mohi, which is the containers or the energy within the containers. That's the Kechad Moshe. That's the power of Moshe. Of Shenyanu, who is Prince Sapsan Tziyazdak. That's the power, not just to confine, to create a Mitzvah, to create a structured existence. It's a Yesh, Nov and Nifrit. Critical to keep that in mind. Because if it was just Gvul, you could say, okay, so there's air, they're both flowing. Here it's not just that it's flowing. Here is a concealment in order to create a Yesh. That's Keyach HaGvul. It begins not with a Yesh like we are. It begins with letters. It begins with some type of substance. Some structure. Okay. Good. That's going to be a Shenyanu, who is well, by Eir Gufa b'chinas ha'Iyu, who b'chinas chitzenis ha'Eir.
This one, the one that goes into the way.
Yeah. Because in general it's Keichad Gvul, but Eir itself, it's Iyu, b'chinas ha'Iyu, who b'chinas chitzenis ha'Eir, then b'chinas atzmus ha'Eir. What's the Eir Gufa b'chinas ha'Iyu?
Looks from here.
B'chinas chitzenis ha'Eir, b'chinas atzmus
It's
ha'Eir.
a Tnimi.
Okay, he's talking about it's inside the cave. Yeah, he said that clearly. Because the air inside the containers is Chitzenis Ha'Eir, not Atzmos Ha'Eir. Very clear.
But even the other part, which is a higher level, is also the Tnimi.
Talking about Yibba Garmoichai.
The Iyuv Chayoyi.
Not up to it. He's now saying Yibba Garmoichai. This is Yibba Garmoichai. The Yin HaYichud. And what's the Yichud here? The unity here.
The Chad.
Remember, in Eir Gufa, because remember, Nageres HaKedish Garmoichai, not Kalim, is the air that it became. So which level of air is it? He says clearly, Chitzenis Ha'Eir. Now what's the Yichud? The Yichud is a B'chinas Tfisas Ha'Eir, B'chinas Chitzenis HaKelim, Shebzeo is Gamas HaKelim Ala Eir. The Yichud is how the air is confined. What do we say? It
Bound.
is
It's so
bound.
bound by the kelim.
By the outer containers, by the outer shed, that through that, his gab that the containers overpower
Or
lahasta la'er to conceal it, lift them pulas eisavos. So in order to cause eisavos, there's b'chinas mitzias yesh. So it's interesting. He says that's the yichud. The yichud because it's
What is mamish dar
in other
and
words,
the
the yichud
kelim?
is like what he said. That the uman, the worker, has to touch, and when he's doing it, once he's touching his vessel, it's already limiting his flow. Because when you see him building a vessel, it's clearly not all of it. He's right now confined in shaping this container. So the yichud is there, but it's a yichud around the container, not a yichud about God. It's a yichud about what He wants to create. So it's His investment and manifestation being bound by the creation that He's created. He's applying Himself to it. That application is a yichud. That's what He's adding there.
Not all of it.
Exactly. 1 second. But we're not over. That would only be for creation. Yeah, 1 second. So that's the other. In order to create the mitzvah yesh. However, you that is misachid with chayu, the energy. That is the infinite, unconfined light. Shukris is galas atzmus. This is not talking about how atzmus is confining himself to build a container or a structure or throw a stone. Now you're talking about revealing atzmus. Binyonu is gili. This is it's in his gili. It's to express God, all of God, as much as you could
So what's
express.
the yichud there? So what's the yichud there?
In hayichud is because taste for said by er primish ad ze yagil der primish lebak bol. That's the yichud.
Draw more on it.
That the er primi, right? Because the er primi on its own is going to manifest in containers, and the er primi should connect to the beir unbelievable. Taste for said by er primi. It's interesting, especially there should be a gil er primi lebak bol.
Slavish Mekayim.
Er primi doesn't really say Slavish Bekelim. It doesn't say that.
Because you have the
You read before, it says-
oil,
I just
and
told
then you have the Phineas oil.
That's in Kelim, fine. But then there's also a dimension of the Eir HaGvul that is before it has Kelim also.
Right, well, this is how it's getting connected to the.
Fine, I'm fine with that. You could say that's the Pnimi Seir, that's fine.
Is that
But it's also Pnimi Seir, but I'm just saying it's not bound only to Kelim.
is that like chachmas
There's
of
Eir HaGvul in Lifnei and Tzimtzum. Yeah, but fine, it's correct.
Said before, he said right here, he said, a yichud, and he said, ilim because chayush,
Yeah.
is that like chachmas of lechakmin, lechikimin?
Yeah. That Shem HaTeir should have the
The or into the it's like
the Etzem Eir, which is Chachma, is given to Chakim to the Eir as it goes into the container. Or it becomes Eir HaGvul and so on.
so. One is a yichud of the, let's say, the shema etzem to the tire, and one is the tire to the pula.
I don't know if it's Teir to the pool of, I think it's more Teir. It may be Shem Etzem also to the pool, but it doesn't say that.
Kiach HaGvul should be in safe. Because it's Echet Shema Etzem Betzem.
No. Shem Etzem is Eir, Etzem Eir that's higher than any, that's pure Eir HaGvul.
No. Iu v'chaye uchat. Was ist der Iu?
Shem Etzem.
Shema Etzem. Und Iu v'garmeu.
Etzem Eir. Huh? If you the Keich HaGvul, doesn't call it Shem Etzem. Shem Etzem is the Gili Etzem. Here's Keich HaGvul, there's no Gili. Kitzur, but I guess I get it. The Yud is not what's happening to the moon with Eir Pnimi. The Yud himself, what is that, the Eir Pnimi? It goes inside the containers, not just the containers themselves. And Eir Shal Tzedek Yisavos, that means the energy that is necessary for creation, Shakeli Magbili, that the container confines. Like the body that limits, confines, and Megashim, and materializes the energy of the soul. In truth, the soul descends in order to illuminate the world. And that's also through the body. The primary way of that work is through those that serve with their soul. That the body is there to reveal the soul. And above that's primis, inner containers and inner energies. Nevertheless, the primary power to do so is the Ul Yisesapche, the Lahoyer, Ul Yisesapche Chashechem Nahem. Means the Lahoyer of the mitzvahs is in order for there to be transformation of darkness to light. Why they Shem Havai de Le'el? That's a Shem Havai Yigiyah Chashech. Not just Benedi Havai Le'el, which is the Neshama. Havai de Lahayr Havai. And Neshama is Mamshech Ma'ar Havai de Teir Mitzvahs, Amshach Atzmis. Neshama is we draw down a reflection and Teir Mitzvahs, Atzmis. Chen HaBitl Havai Yichud HaBitl Havai de Teir Mitzvahs. So the real bitl, total sublimation and unity, the true sublimation and unity is through Teir Mitzvahs. This is also what the others they drew down that the world should not conceal. And through Torah mitzvahs that came by Matan Torah, the Sinai, that transformed it. The darkness should transform to light. Those that serve with their bodies, there the air does come, energy does come materialized. And above that, the outer containers, that enclose and confine the outer dimension of it, that's Shema Pu'ula, the name that of function. That's a separate reflection. That's already like the throwing of the stone. Like the stone, once it leaves the hand of the thrower, shows that only then do you really see the action. That's Yirvik that he and his Gamui, that the container conceals an energy. But that's also a yichud. Because it's a yichud in order to create. Shazel b'shoshe b'keich hagvul. That in its root is the keich hagvul of Ein Sof, the power to confine. The Iyu v'chayu, second Iyu v'chayu, the first one, Iyu v'chayu, him and his energy, who ili ba'er shabba b'midu gul, is b'li hagvul. As the ilig, that's the virtue, the quality, that in the energy that comes in a confined way, it should have in it also the dimension of blikvul, which he doesn't explain what that means. That needs explanation. What does it mean that gvul should have blikvul? We'll discuss that. But that thing is like the infinite possibilities of God sees the finite structure, sees the finite life pattern. We'll stop here. We finished chapter 155. 1 second. Page 306 and 307.